Hello everyone, welcome to Midha Physiology blogs, and I am Dr. Sonam. Today we are going to discuss about renin. So this is a picture of a juxtaglomerular apparatus. You can see these are the smooth muscle modified in the afferent arteriole as JG cell. These are the columnar modified cells at the distal tubule, which is called macula densa, and in between there is a mesangial cell. So when we are talking about the renin is basically synthesized and secreted from this JG cell. Okay, the JG cell, which are the modified smooth muscle in the afferent arteriole. Now let us look at the function of the renin. You can see that the renin, which is being secreted from the kidney, from the JG cell, right? They are going to act over the angiotensinogen. Now this angiotensinogen is secreted from the liver. So it is a plasma protein which is the alpha 2 globulin part of alpha 2 globulin fraction of the plasma. Okay, now this angiotensinogen would be converted into angiotensin 1, carrying 10 amino acid with the help of this enzyme, that is renin, which is secreted from the JG cell. This angiotensin 1 would be ultimately converted into angiotensin 2. Okay, and this process occurs in the endothelium of the capillaries present in the lungs and other organ, and for this process to occur we require another enzyme, that is angiotensin converting enzyme. When we are talking about angiotensin 1, you see that it was carrying 10 amino acids, so it was a decapeptide, and when it has been converted into angiotensin 2, it is carrying 8 amino acid, so it is an octapeptide. Now whenever we are talking about the function of renin, remember the function of renin is basically it is going to help in that process which is eventually leading to the formation of angiotensin 2, that is an octapeptide. Okay, now this angiotensin 2 is very important molecule for the maintenance of our blood pressure in a long term. Okay, there are many mechanisms of action via which it is acting, but the two primary one you can see over here are it is acting over the cardiovascular system and it is acting over the adrenal cortex. Okay, so when it is acting over the cardiovascular system, one of the primary effect you can see is here you can see is angiotensin 2 is basically going to cause the vasoconstriction. So via vasoconstriction of our body, right, the angiotensin 2 is trying to elevate our blood pressure. The other one is when this angiotensin 2 is acting over the adrenal cortex, it is helping in the synthesis and the production of this aldosterone, okay, a hormone. So this aldosterone would now go into the kidney only, and in the kidney renal tubule it is going to cause more salt and water retention, and this more salt and water retention is also associated with the increase in blood pressure. Okay, so you can see the ultimate function of this angiotensin 2 is related with the elevation of our blood pressure, and this angiotensin 2 is being formed via the action of the angiotensin converting enzyme, right? And this angiotensin converting enzyme was acting over the angiotensin 1, and this angiotensin 1 was being formed from the angiotensinogen. Okay, and for this thing to occur, renin is playing very important role. Now let us look at the stimuli for the renin secretion. The first stimuli is the decreased blood pressure or the blood volume at the afferent arteriole only. So whenever the afferent arteriole it is having decreased blood pressure or blood volume, the JG cell would signal it and it is going to cause secretion of the renin, right? And this renin would now act via the angiotensin 2 so as to elevate the blood pressure or the blood volume in the body. Now the another stimuli is decrease in the sodium chloride load in the ultrafiltrate. Okay, this would be signaled from the macula densa region. So how this mechanism is acting we have discussed in the tubulo-glomerular feedback mechanism in my previous video related with the juxtaglomerular apparatus. If you want to know in detail, you can please check my last video. Now the another stimuli for the renin secretion is the sympathetic stimulation. The JG cells in which the renin is synthesized and from where the renin would be released, okay, they are innervated by the sympathetic nerve. So when there is sympathetic stimulation or whenever circulating catecholamines are coming by this beta 1 receptor, and from this secondary mediator, that is cyclic AMP, the JG cells would now release more renin, and this renin would eventually help in the formation of angiotensin 2 so as to elevate the blood pressure. And another stimuli is also what they have found is prostaglandin. Okay, the prostaglandin is also acting in the JG cell for this secretion of the renin. Now the inhibitors in the renin secretion are just opposite to that of stimulators. You can see that whenever there is increase in the afferent arterial pressure, then the JG cells, which are the volume receptor or the baroreceptor, they would not be stimulated, because in our last video only we came to discuss that the JG cells, they are low pressure baroreceptor, right? So if the JG cells are inhibited or not stimulated, obviously the renin would not be secreted and angiotensin 2 would not be formed excessively in our body. So if there is no angiotensin 2 formation, the blood pressure would not be elevated, right? So the stimuli over here was increased arterial pressure only. So in that condition, we do not require the more formation of angiotensin 2, so we do not require the renin to be secreted. Similarly, the other inhibitor is the increased sodium chloride ultrafiltrate in the macula densa. So this is also one of the component of tubular-glomerular feedback mechanism, which you can check in my last video. Now, the another inhibitor is angiotensin 2. Okay, the angiotensin 2 is ultimately formed by the action of renin. So when there is the secretion of renin and ultimately it is going to produce more angiotensin 2, this angiotensin 2 is now going to give feedback signal to the JG cell for the decrease in the secretion of renin. Okay, because the body does not want the blood pressure to be elevated in a very higher range. Now another inhibitor for the renin secretion is vasopressin, also called antidiuretic hormone. This vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is secreted from the posterior pituitary, and it is acting in our body via two receptors, V1 receptor and V2 receptor. Via V2 receptor, it is acting in the kidneys for the fluid reabsorption. Okay, and via V1 receptor, when this vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is present in very higher amount, then they would act via the V1 receptor present in the blood vessel, and it is associated with the constriction of the blood vessel. Okay, so since this is associated with the constriction of the blood vessel, the antidiuretic hormone has also been termed as the vasopressin. Okay, so here you can see that whenever this antidiuretic hormone is acting in the kidney via the V2 receptor, this antidiuretic hormone acting via the V2 receptor, it is going to cause increase in the cyclic AMP formation. Okay, they are basically going to act by activation the adenylyl cyclase. So this V2 receptor is basically a G protein coupled receptor with a GS subunit, and this cyclic AMP is having a protein kinase A, and this is going to cause increased insertion of aquaporin channel in the tubular lumen. Okay, so this kind of mechanism you can see in the collecting duct in the principal cell. So when there will be increased insertion of this water channel or aquaporin channel under the effect of antidiuretic hormone, more amount of water would be reabsorbed back into the epithelial cells, and from the epithelial cell into the interstitium, and again back to our circulation. Okay, so you see that due to increased fluid reabsorption, there will be increase in the blood volume, and this is ultimately going to cause increase in the arterial pressure. Okay, now the another mechanism of action is this antidiuretic hormone, they can also act via the V1 receptor. This V1 receptor is having GQ subunit which activates the phospholipase C, and this is ultimately going to cause the formation of secondary mediator, that is IP3, inositol triphosphate. Okay, and this secondary mediator is now going to cause more release of calcium from the endoplasmic reticulum, and this calcium is related with the constriction of the contractile tissue. Okay, now if that contractile tissue is the smooth muscle present in the blood vessel, obviously the blood vessel will be constricted, and again the arterial pressure would be elevated. Okay, so in this condition you see that whenever vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is secreted, elevated in our body, right, in that condition the arterial pressure would be increased, and whenever this arterial pressure would be increased, then obviously we do not require the renin to be secreted, because if the renin would be secreted, again the angiotensin 2 would be formed more in the body, and they would now increase the blood pressure much more. That is not what we require, right? So vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is also the inhibitor for the renin secretion. Now let us revise this thing again. When we are talking about the renin, the function of renin is basically to convert the angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. This angiotensin 1 will be converted into angiotensin 2, which is an octapeptide by the angiotensin converting enzyme. This enzyme is also converting bradykinin into inactive metabolites. Okay, so whenever we are giving any drugs which is going to inhibit this enzyme, for the lesser formation of angiotensin 2 and lesser elevation of the blood pressure in our body, so whenever we are giving the drugs targeting to decrease the blood pressure, which is going to inhibit the angiotensin converting enzyme, they are also going to cause less of conversion of bradykinin into inactive metabolites, and due to increased accumulation of bradykinin, they are leading to the symptoms like increased cough. Okay, now this angiotensin 2, which is very important for the increase in the blood pressure of our body, they can act via the 81 or 82 receptor. Okay, and this angiotensin 2 can also be acted upon by various peptidases, angiotensinogens, or you can also call aminopeptidases, to convert into another product like angiotensin 3, 4 and subsequently other inactive metabolite. Okay, now when this angiotensin 2, which is an octapeptide, from this octapeptide, when one amino acid is released, that peptide which is containing 7 amino acids, that heptapeptide is angiotensin 3, and from that heptapeptide, when one amino acid is released, there will be hexapeptide, that is angiotensin 4. Okay, and subsequently there will be formation of other inactive metabolites by the action of these peptidases. Now when we are talking about this angiotensin 3, we have come to know that this angiotensin 3 has 40% pressure effect and 100% aldosterone secretion effect. Okay, so this angiotensin 3 is not so inactive. Okay, it is also helpful for potentiating the aldosterone secretion, and 40% it is also having pressure effect. But in comparison to angiotensin 3, angiotensin 2 is playing very important role for all those mechanisms to activate which is associated with the increase in blood pressure of our body. Okay, and for that thing to occur, they're basically going to act via the 81 receptor or 82 receptor. Okay, both of these receptor, they are G protein coupled receptor, but how this 82 receptor is basically going to act so as to have the physiological consequences in our body, that is clearly not understood. But all this function related with angiotensin 2 is related with this 81 receptor only. So here you can see this 81 receptor, which is having upon which the angiotensin 2 is going to act to produce so many axon. Okay, so this is a G protein coupled receptor. Here you can see that some of its subunit. Okay, this subunit here you can see it is having alpha Q or GQ subunit, and ultimately it is going to cause the IP3. From this IP3 there will be increased formation of calcium, and this calcium is associated with the constriction. So via this mechanism it can cause the vasoconstriction, and they can cause the increase in the blood pressure. However, this 81 receptor also has another subunit. You can see alpha I subunit, alpha S subunit, and other various secondary mediator. You can see sometimes it can cause decrease in cyclic AMP or increase in cyclic AMP, or they can cause the signaling towards the gene only. Okay, so as to alter the transcription translation process. So the mechanism of action is various. Okay, though they are G protein coupled receptor. Though there are many mechanisms of action, the organ where they are going to act we can now summarize as they are acting over the cardiovascular system, they are acting over the brain, or they are acting over the adrenal gland. Okay, now in the cardiovascular system, the angiotensin 2, when they are going to act via the angiotensin 1 receptor, this angiotensin 1 receptor via the G alpha Q subunit, you can see that it is associated with increase in calcium ion inside the cell, right? So this calcium ion increase inside this smooth muscle may be related with the vasoconstriction. So this is one of the very important mechanism of action of this angiotensin 2 via angiotensin 1 receptor. Via angiotensin 2 type 1 receptor, it is going to cause vasoconstriction so as to elevate the blood pressure. Okay, similarly they have also found that they are also regulated with the cellular proliferation and remodeling, okay, in the cardiac, in the heart, as well as in the vessel. And now what they have also found is in the heart, they are also associated with the increase in the inotropic, increase in the chronotropic effect. Okay, now while talking about the angiotensin 2 function in the brain, we have to know that this angiotensin 2 was produced from the JG cell, of the kidney, right, and it is being circulated in the blood. Now from the blood, not every material can directly go into the brain, okay, because there is blood brain barrier. So only there are 4 area in the brain where the substances they can act so as to produce the effect in the brain. So those 4 area we have named it as the circumventricular organ, and there are 4 such circumventricular organ, among which via acting through this organum vasculosum of lamina terminalis or the subfornical organ, which is a part of ventricular organ, they can initiate these 2 process, okay. They can initiate thirst. So this angiotensin 2 in the brain via acting through this circumventricular organ, they can stimulate the thirst center so that the person will start to drink more, right, and eventually is a potentiating factor for increase in the blood volume associated with the increase in the pressure later on. Similarly, this angiotensin 2 is also associated with the increased secretion of the anti-diuretic hormone from the posterior pituitary. So how this anti-diuretic hormone is going to act in the kidney and the vessel we have just discussed, and ultimately they are going to cause increase in the arterial pressure, right. Now the another organ where they are going to act is in the adrenal gland, okay. So this angiotensin 2, when they act over the adrenal gland in the cortical layer, okay, they are going to cause more production of aldosterone, and this aldosterone is eventually leading to more renal sodium and fluid retention, okay. So whenever there is more renal sodium and fluid retention, obviously the water and the sodium chloride, when overloaded in the blood in the circulatory system, it may be associated with the increase in the pressure also. So this is how this angiotensin 2, okay, they are going to act in various organs so as to elevate the blood pressure. So you can see that thing again over here. The angiotensin 2, when they are acting over the arterial, by its action in the smooth muscle, they will constrict it, and due to vasoconstriction, the blood pressure would be elevated, okay. Now similar thing, if we compare it in the nephron, we know that there are 2 arterial, the afferent arterial and the efferent arterial, okay. But what they have found is the receptor in the efferent arterial is comparatively very more, okay, higher amount than in the afferent arterial. So what will happen is, under the effect of angiotensin 2, the efferent arterial will be constricted, so the blood would now be resistant to flow through the efferent arterial, right, and due to which the pressure of the blood would now be forced towards backward into the capillary only, and from the capillary, due to increase in the hydrostatic pressure, the glomerular filtration rate would be increased, okay. So the first effect of the angiotensin 2 was the increase in the glomerular filtration rate. Now you can see here, when the efferent arterial was constricted, the glomerular from the capillaries, the filtration rate was increased. Now if the filtration rate was only increased and the ultrafiltrate is more formed, there will be more formation of urine, then obviously if the more amount of water and the electrolytes is taken out of the body in the form of urine, then it is going to lead to the decrease in the blood pressure and the blood volume, right. So this is not what the angiotensin 2 is going to function like. So this angiotensin 2, in one hand, in the nephron, you can say it is going to cause decrease in the GFR, but also you see that due to the constriction in the efferent arterial, the blood flow in the peritubular capillary is also decreased, right. And since in the capillary there was more filtration of the water and the electrolytes, now whatever blood is flowing in the peritubular capillary, it has plasma protein only. So obviously in the peritubular capillary, the osmotic pressure, the osmotic gradient is increased. Now if the osmotic gradient is increased, now the reabsorption of the water and electrolyte from the tubular portion up to this peritubular capillary, it will be exaggerated or it will be enhanced, okay. So in this way, angiotensin 2, firstly it increases the GFR, but also in the tubular portion, it is helping in more reabsorption of the water and electrolytes, and ultimately the water and the electrolytes from the ultrafiltrate would be circulated back to our body and maintain the blood pressure, okay. So that was the function of the angiotensin 2 in the nephron and the arteriole as a whole. Now let us see the function of this angiotensin 2 in the adrenal gland. In the adrenal gland, in the cortical area, there are many synthesis of the steroids from the cholesterol, okay. Here you can see that under the effect of angiotensin 2, okay, the cholesterol was converted into pregnenolone, and this process ultimately is leading to the formation of corticosterone. And here you see that from the corticosterone to be for the aldosterone to be synthesized, we again need the help of angiotensin 2. Okay, so this angiotensin 2 over here is basically going to foster the activity of aldosterone synthesis. So here, for the proper production of this aldosterone, we actually require angiotensin 2. If there is no angiotensin 2, the aldosterone synthesis would be diminished. Okay, now what is the function of aldosterone 2 is, you see here. So this is again the principal cell. So in the distal tubule or in the collecting duct, you can see this process. This aldosterone, which is being secreted from the adrenal gland cortical area, it is going to act over this distal part of the renal tubule. Okay, and this aldosterone, since being synthesized from the cholesterol, they can cross the cell membrane, and its receptor is located in the cytoplasm. So when this aldosterone and its receptor, okay, they make a complex, now they are going to alter the transcription and translation process. Okay, they are going to alter the genetic activity, due to which there will be more formation of the protein like ENaC. Okay, so ENaC is a epithelial sodium channel. So these channels are going to be inserted into the tubular lumen, and when this channel are functioning, okay, then in the ultrafiltrate, if the sodium is coming, okay, this sodium would now would be reabsorbed via this simple diffusion, because this is a channel associated with the sodium present in the epithelium, so you call it epithelial sodium channel. So by increase in the epithelial sodium channel formation and insertion, it helps in more sodium reabsorption. Okay, similarly, due to the alteration in the genetic activity, due to the effect of aldosterone, it is also associated with the increase in the functioning of sodium potassium pump. Okay, so there may be increased formation of sodium potassium pump, or there may be increase in the ATP. Okay, the mitochondrial enzymes may be increased, so that the sodium potassium activity would be increased. So ultimately, whenever its number or activity is increased, the sodium from the epithelial side would be now more effluxed into the interstitium side, and from the interstitial fluid it would be reabsorbed back into the peritubular capillary, which is draining the blood containing the sodium into the body. Okay, so here aldosterone is now basically going to cause the sodium reabsorption, firstly via increase in the epithelial sodium channel insertion in the luminal side of the epithelium, right, and by increasing the sodium potassium pump activity, so that whatever sodium is being reabsorbed, it would be now go back into the circulation. And this aldosterone was basically synthesized under the effect of angiotensin 2. So this angiotensin 2 via the aldosterone is basically going to cause more reabsorption of sodium, and this sodium along with the osmosis of water, okay, may cause the increased amount of blood volume to be increased amount of water and electrolyte to be reabsorbed back into the body, so that the blood volume would be increased, and then the pressure would be elevated. So the function of angiotensin 2 now can be summarized as, so it is a generalized arterial constrictor. Okay, so it is going to constrict the arterioles of our body, and this function of the angiotensin 2 is 4 to 8 times more powerful than norepinephrine. The another function of angiotensin 2 is, it is going to stimulate the zona glomerulosa of the adrenal cortex to cause increased aldosterone secretion, which is going to cause increased sodium reabsorption by kidney. Similarly, the angiotensin 2 is also facilitating release of norepinephrine by direct action on the postganglionic sympathetic nerve. Okay, due to this action, now again norepinephrine will be more released, and this is again potentiating the sympathetic activity, and again the blood pressure would be elevated. Similarly, the other effect of the angiotensin 2 is contraction of the mesangial cell, due to which the capillary diameter would be decreased, the glomerular capillary diameter would be decreased, the GFR, the glomerular filtration rate, would be decreased, right, and it tries to decrease the it tries to avoid the more blood to be filtrated. That means the blood volume would be retained in the blood, in the capillary only, in the body only, not out of the body. Similarly, it is also acting in the brain for increased water intake, for increased secretion of vasopressin, right? This thing we have discussed. And now they have also found that via the action in the area postrema, which is also one of the circumventricular organ, they are also causing direct pressure potentiation effect. Okay, so how they are going to do this is by decreasing the sensitivity of the barrier reflex. So in the aortic arch and in the carotid sinus, we have the high pressure baroreceptor, so their sensitivity would be decreased, due to which the pressure potentiation effect would occur. Okay, similarly, the other function of the angiotensin 2 is it is going to inhibit the secretion of the renin, so that the over elevation of the blood pressure may not occur. Okay, and also the angiotensin 2 also have direct effect in the renal tubular cells, so as to increase the sodium reabsorption. So how this is occurring is, you can see this is a diagram from the proximal convoluted tubule only. Here you can see this is the tubular side and this is the basal side. Okay, in the tubular side, for the reabsorption of the sodium, we have this transporter, sodium hydrogen counter transporter. Okay, so here the sodium is being reabsorbed from the ultrafiltrate, which is coming in the tubular lumen, and for this transporter to work, the hydrogen has to be transported out into the lumen, tubular lumen. Okay, and when this angiotensin 2 is working in the receptor, the AT1 receptor, which is present in the luminal side, it is going to cause the increase in the activity of this sodium hydrogen counter transporter. Okay, due to which there will be increase in sodium reabsorption. Now similarly, if this angiotensin 2 is going to act over the AT1 receptor, which is present in the basal side of this epithelial cell, what they are going to do is they are going to cause the increased activity of this sodium potassium pump. So whenever there is increased activity of sodium potassium pump, increased amount of sodium from the epithelium cytoplasm. Okay, so whatever sodium was being reabsorbed, that sodium from this cytoplasm would now be more extruded outside, and from this interstitium it would be now reabsorbed back into our body. Similarly, the angiotensin 2 acting on the AT1 receptor, it is not only helping in more activity of the sodium potassium pump, but they may also cause increase in the activity of sodium bicarbonate co-transporter. In this also, the sodium would now be excreted, is now being transported out of the cell into the renal interstitium, and from the renal interstitium the sodium would now go into the peritubular capillary and it would be reabsorbed back into our body. So in this way, angiotensin 2 itself can directly act in the tubular cells, okay, so as to cause renal reabsorption either in the luminal side or in the basal side. So yes, we have discussed about the functions of renin today. So when we are talking about the function of renin, the only function of renin is helping in the production of angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 is now via acting through the brain or via acting through the adrenal gland or from the cardiovascular system. They are basically going to increase the blood pressure of our body. Okay, now the another interesting thing what we have studied, what we can see in our textbook is there is this is experimental setup, okay, in which this animal, okay, in this animal they by clamping one of the renal artery, there is the constriction done. Okay, so constriction of one of the renal artery is done by clamping, and due to which the renal blood flow towards the afferent arteriole would be decreased. So whenever the renal blood flow towards the afferent arteriole would be decreased, then the JG cell would be stimulated for the secretion of renin. So you can see there will be prompt increase in the renin secretion. So this renin secretion would now eventually leading to the formation of angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 is now going to activate all this process related with the increase in the blood pressure, due to which you can see the animal will have the hypertension, right? So this mechanism, this kind of hypertension has been named gallbladder hypertension, and this thing in practically what we can see in the patient is, obviously in the patient it is not like we are going to clamp the renal artery, but the renal artery would be narrowed, okay, because of the atheromas, or the tunica intima layer would be accumulated with more of the debris or lipid, right, due to which you can see that the renal artery would be narrowed, right, and due to the narrowing of this renal artery, again the JG cell would be more stimulated, forming the more amount of renin, and from this renin more amount of angiotensin 2 will be produced, and this angiotensin 2 would eventually lead to increased blood pressure in the body. Okay, so this is also leading to the hypertension in some of the individual. So this hypertension is renal hypertension, or the secondary cause of hypertension, okay, one of the secondary cause of hypertension. Yes, so with this we have finished with this video. So in today's video we have basically discussed about the function of renin, and we have decoded, okay, we have just illustrated more detailedly about how angiotensin 2 is basically going to act in our body so as to elevate the blood pressure. So yes, I hope that this videos would also be helpful to you. So if you like this video, please like, share and subscribe to our channel. And yes, if you have any queries, any question, any suggestion, please do comment. Thank you.